our aims for today, here we go, are to answer 3 questions. So the first one, what might cause a child to worry about returning to school? So within this question, we want to consider what worry is, when it is useful, when it starts to become more problematic, and we'll also consider some of the reasons why children may worry about school. The second question that we want to answer as part of this webinar is what sort of behaviours might be witnessed at home. So what might you be experiencing at home? So we're thinking about really within this question, how children communicate their worries, what they might do in order to show their worries and their feelings through their behaviour. Finally, our last question, how can you support your child at home to manage their worries? So this is the thing that we want to spend, this question is the one that we want to spend the most time focusing upon in our presentation, how we support our children at home. And we're going to look at sort of what we might say, so the sorts of scripts that we might use, how we might respond, top tips, and then at the end also I've put together like a list of resources and websites. So if you wanted extra material, extra information, if you want parent support lines, they're all there on the very last slide at the end. Right, I'm going to hand over to Lucy for the next one.
Okay, so just understanding worry and anxiety, particularly in children. You need to, I can't see the notes, sorry Lisa.
What do you need from me? Sorry, Lucy.
Sorry, the notes that normally run along the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I can't. There isn't any way of accessing that. If you print it off, Lucy.
So just to acknowledge that understanding worry and anxiety is just a normal feeling and emotion that we all experience. It's a perfectly healthy emotion. It's a function that's sort of programmed into us to help keep us safe from harm, because if we didn't have any worries or anxieties about anything, then we potentially put ourselves in risky situations, jumping off cliffs, those kind of things. So it is a useful emotion for us to have to help us perform in difficult situations. We cannot help or change how we feel. Those feelings are beyond our control. They can come to us when we least expect it, but we can learn how to manage our feelings and also how to help our children manage their feelings better as well. So what might cause a child to worry about returning to school, particularly at the moment? It's a really tricky time, so it's extra worry and concern. A transition, any sort of transition from one thing to the other. A transition is a change of routine, what's the normal. So a transition, a new school year, new teacher, somebody that they perhaps don't know, a new school. We know that the transition from nursery to primary school and from primary school to secondary school is particularly difficult for children. Children are likely to worry over how things are going to be in school, what's going to be different, what is going to be the same. For example, how will the bubbles work? Will I be able to see my friends in different classes? What's going to happen at playtime? Those kind of things. Because as well as the big transitions, particularly for younger children, they can get very anxious over the small transitions. So, for example, transitioning from the classroom to lunchtime, transitioning to outside, and then again from outside to inside. Any sort of transition can be tricky for them, any sort of change. So there's always the worry for children that they're going to be picked on or threatened or experience any type of bullying. Worried about any social or peer pressure to have friends and play with them. When they are younger as well, they'll experience this, and particularly shifting into when they become older and wanting to fit in as teenagers as well. Worry over what others may think of them. For example, if the teacher asks them a question and they get it wrong. Children are quite savvy nowadays, aren't they, on what their abilities are in a classroom. and they can feel quite embarrassed or ashamed if they're not getting things quite right. Also, the pressure of the academic work and the demands. What if I don't understand it? If it's too hard, what do I do? Children have got all those worries to contend with on a daily basis. There's also the worry for children about parents, siblings, or any other family members at home. Lots of children don't want to be away from them at home, particularly if there's any difficulties at the moment. Perhaps a parent has got some health issues at the moment, so the child has got extra anxieties about what's happening at home with their loved ones whilst they're at school.
Okay, so typically what we want to try and do for our children is to build bravery and resilience. So we want to encourage our children that even though they might be worried about school, it's important, and even though they don't want to, it's important that they still try and do something. So we try to do problem solving, try to put plans into place to make it easier for them. We try to build their strategies of managing their feelings by taking a deep breath, positive self-talk, build bravery, resilience, problem solve with our children. And ultimately what we want to do is just try to build their own strategies with their worries.
With no complicated forms.
Yes, that's right.
Hiya, if anybody's just joined us, would you be able to just pop your microphone on mute?
Amount of £60,000
And also off, just so we don't really get thrown out.
You won't need a medical or a blood test.
Yeah, pop yourself on mute. We can hear a few TVs and things in the background.
It's okay. Where's the mute thing on it?
Just wave your mouse around.
Yeah, if you wave your mouse around.
Get on the video.
Oh,
there, I've got it. Yeah,
There.
yeah, on the video.
That's it.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So what we're going to try and look at throughout the rest of this presentation is to try and do all of those things for our children. Think about problem solving, think about how they manage their own emotions, and how to build bravery and resilience with our children. Okay, Sharon?
Okay, so we're going to look now at what sorts of behaviour might be witnessed at home. So this isn't a definitive list of the sorts of behaviours that you might experience at home, but it's an example. So they could include things like more anger from your child. Anger is often a secondary emotion as a result of worry, anxiety, and or fear. So the more worried that a child is, the angrier they can become. Sometimes instead of being angry, children will become quieter and more withdrawn, and they won't share their feelings, thoughts, and worries. They may also try to delay going to school by refusing to get dressed, to get out of bed, having tantrums, for example. They will typically behave in a way that they think will enable them to escape a worrying situation. Some parents report that children will also delay going to bed to try and delay the arrival of the morning or not engage in evening routines on school nights. At times, children will feign illness, and although the stress that they feel can often make them feel ill and give them a stomach ache or a headache, these symptoms are completely real. You may also experience pleading, begging, emotional blackmail as they try to get you to say that they do not need to go to school. And it's important that parents stand firm about them needing to go to school. All the research says still send them, but work with school on plans to support what the issues are. Children need to attend as much as possible. Once they stop going completely, it's really difficult to get them back. Okay, I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thank you. So I don't know how big this is on people's slides or whether you can see it very well, but this is just an image that was shared by West Sussex Educational Psychology Service, and it just provides an example of what happens once children avoid school and stop attending, and it's a very vicious cycle that they get into, which is why it's so important to keep them attending as much as possible. So firstly, they have anxious feelings about school, which produces negative thoughts about their ability to cope. What then happens is then they avoid the school situation, do whatever they can, normally through some of the behaviours we've just shared, and maybe even other ones so they use those behaviours then to get them out of going to school and avoiding it. That then makes them anxious. Avoiding going to school reduces their anxiety, but what happens is it increases the school avoidance. Once they stop going to school, what happens is they then fall behind in their schoolwork, they lose their friends, they become isolated and feel alone. And that also increases their anxiety around school. So whilst not attending school, many children will engage with some pleasurable activities at home, and therefore being at home becomes more motivating to them. And therefore, again, their motivation to attend decreases. So this is part of the reason why the research always says that parents and schools are always prompted to really work together, get children in as much as possible. What we don't want children to do is to start to lose friends, fall behind with schoolwork, which decreases the motivation further. And therefore, one of the most important responses as a parent that we can give is to empathise and recognise their worry and fear, but also to set your boundaries and stand your ground and say that they have to go, just to avoid children falling into that cycle of school avoidance, because once they're in it, it is really difficult to break them out of it. So I just felt that was really important to sort of share that with all the work that we're doing today to support our children. Sharon?
Right. Okay. So, how can you support your child to manage their worries at home? So, Public Health England have highlighted protective factors within a family that help children manage their emotions and also build resilience. The most important protective factor is a good supportive relationship. So planning time to complete activities together as a family. And this will help to build positive connections, enjoyment and warmth in your relationships. Family projects like growing vegetables, doing gardening, baking together are a good way to do this. But spontaneous acts, for example, dancing and singing to a favourite song, having a laugh, sharing a joke, all of this builds good relationships. The rest of this slide considers how we, as parents, promote good supportive relationships through the interactions and responses we give to our children, particularly when they're dealing with big feelings like fear, worry, or anger. The information on this slide is from a technique called emotion coaching, which has been shown to promote good mental health and well-being in children. Where possible, adults need to bring the calm. This isn't always easy, especially on days when you yourself are feeling irritated, anxious, or annoyed. Remember, though, that when children see us remaining calm and managing our feelings, this sends a good example to them. They learn best from how we model managing difficult feelings. At these times, we need to breathe and calm ourselves first. Some people refer to this as putting on your oxygen mask before you respond. And this can be a useful step when managing strong emotions in our children. This involves two things: trying to hold on to how you feel and not take it personally. And that's much easier said than done, but it is possible. And two, responding slowly after counting to 10 and breathing with a calm and quiet tone. This helps children in turn to mirror or copy the calm. This can bring them down emotionally. Remember that emotions are contagious. So anger, rage, anxiety, but also calm. When we practice and model being calm ourselves, and not reacting at times when emotions like fear and worry are running high, children will also learn this key life skill. As parents, we are a safe emotional base for our children, and children often seek us out or cling to us when they are emotionally distressed as a way of trying to bring themselves down. We are a secure neurochemical base that can help to soothe big feelings, restoring a sense of safety and calm. This is a chemical process involving a range of feel-good hormones, so we should not underestimate the impact of taking time to soothe fear, anxiety, and anger first. As parents, we should connect before correcting using empathy. We can do this by considering what we need from others when we've made a mistake, not being able to do what we wanted or just felt plain angry. Judgments and advice, or empathy and understanding. Using empathy and validation of how the child feels, whether we agree or not, allows us to connect with our children before we correct, stand firm, and set boundaries. This encourages us to empathise with the feelings that underlie the behaviour and label them, which helps to calm angry or worried children. Using empathy first means that children feel heard and validated, and that calms them more quickly. This can sometimes prevent situations escalating and also means children will be more likely in time to listen, accept boundaries, and tolerate sanctions if these are needed. We are way more likely to listen and calm down when we feel heard and understood first. The voice of understanding is the voice we hear the best. So get curious. We often want to get to the solution and fix the situation, but moving too quickly to a solution before being curious and empathizing first can be dismissive of emotions and make children think that what they are feeling is wrong, which confuses them emotionally, and it can lead to further worry and anger. But taking time to get curious and wonder aloud what feelings underlie the behaviour can be helpful for children. For example, for a child who's showing angry behaviour because they cannot go to see a friend, we could say, I wonder if you're actually feeling disappointed because you can't see your friend, and this is why you're angry. Naming the underlying feelings helps children to feel understood, as well as longer term to recognise and label emotions. If they can label it, they can talk about it rather than act it out. So problem solving. Problem solving with our children has been talked about in a previous slide when thinking about what may be worrying them about returning to school. This is an important step after providing a safe base, being curious and empathising. This is where we would discuss with our children what would help, and using a script like, I can hear how worried you are, but you have to go to school. What would help you? You might offer up ideas and suggestions they may say no to, but they know you're willing to help and support them. This sometimes can be enough to reduce the anxiety. Children might also provide some good ideas that can be acted upon, which would help them feel more in control. We typically feel most worried when we feel we have no power or control over our situation. And then check in on the emotional temperature. Take time to talk about how everyone is feeling so that changes can be made before emotions get out of hand. Sometimes chats about feelings are better held during simple daily activities. For example, when driving in the car or doing the washing up, the reduced eye contact makes the conversation feel less intense. Talk about when and how routines, chores, homework, etc. might happen. Include children's views where possible, as this helps them feel a level of control and that they have a say. Okay, pass back to Lucy.
Okay, so coming up now, we've got some tips for children, helping children return to school smoothly. So good preparation is always a good idea. Getting your child involved in choosing uniform, school bags, for example. Making sure you talk to your child about what's going to be happening soon, what the morning routine might look like, new teachers. Schools can really help with transitions by, obviously during COVID they haven't been able to do it, but home visits, pictures of teachers, looking on the school's website so your child can get familiar with their new teacher's face, that kind of thing. Get them used to the morning routines, have a practice when there's no pressure. So it's not daft or silly to practice getting ready for school on a Saturday if that's what you think your child might need. Picture cards can be used for young children and children with disabilities. They'll remember routines and feel far more secure if you've got some picture cards, an example of what their morning might look like. However, remember, for some children, the more notice and more preparation you give them, the more anxious they can become. So you know your child best, and it's best that you decide how much preparation and practice that they need. You know, some children, if you tell them their birthday is in 2 weeks' time, they'll drive you mad for 2 weeks and get really, really either excited, anxious about it or whatever. Some children are better off being told, particularly young, okay, your birthday's in 2 days, or, you know, we're going back to school in 2 days. Some children might prefer a longer time to prepare, but for some children, the longer you give them, the more anxious they become. So that's up to you to figure out how much notice and preparation your child might need. So it's important that our children don't go into school expecting everything to look the same this year. It's going to be really, really difficult for them, and it'll be a huge shock when they walk through the door. Explain things will look different, but tell your child not to worry, because the teachers have been thinking very, very hard over the summer holidays and before on how to make things as safe as possible in their classroom. And they will help them. They'll be there to help and support them with the new layouts and routines. If school have made photos of classrooms available on the websites and things like that, share them with your child to discuss how it's going to look, so it's not a total shock as they walk through the door. Talk about, it's also going to be really helpful to talk about the things that won't change. It's very easy for us to focus on the negative, isn't it? What's going to be different, what's going to be changed. But say things to your child like, your friend's still going to be the same. Your best friend's still going to have the same colour hair, the same kind smile. Those kind of things that are going to be the same can be reassuring for them as well to keep in their mind. On the run up, but explain as well who's going to be dropping them off and picking them up, and explain and maybe write it down or draw it in pictures for them to keep in their bag if they need that extra reassurance of what's happening next. Even if it seems obvious to us, like who's dropping you off and picking you up, sometimes this is an anxiety worry for children if it hasn't quite been ticked off your checklist before you start. In the run up to returning, make time for little conversations like the emotional check-ins on the previous slide, but ask them how they're feeling about going back to school. The aim is to see if they've got concerns, but not to suggest to them that they should be worried. If your child does have worries, acknowledge them and acknowledge their concerns before offering reassurance. For example, you could say something like, it's normal to feel worried about the virus, but here's what you can do to stay safe in school. Focus on what is in their control and what they can do. So, for example, I bet the other children will feel worried about having a new teacher too. That's why Mr. Smith will spend lots of time explaining how everything will work. A good way of turning a negative into a positive is using the phrase at least. For example, I know we can't spend time together today, but at least we can have some time straight after school. I know you're in a different class from your best friend, but at least the teachers are going to make sure everyone can make new friends. Don't be surprised if children want to talk about the same issue a number of times. Children often need to repeatedly revisit an idea with an adult to get the reassurance and the idea into their head. It's natural for all of us as parents to have some level of anxiety about returning to school. This is a very different year for everybody, parents, children and teachers included. But however you feel on the inside, it's really important to try and convey that calm to your children. As Sharon was saying in the slide earlier, even if we're feeling terribly anxious inside, to try and, you know, show some calmness to our children. Put your own oxygen mask on first. You know, when you're on an aeroplane and something terrible happens, the oxygen masks drop down, and you're always told to put your mask on first before you help other people. If you don't put your mask on first, you're no good to anybody, are you? So you've got to spend time looking after yourself, breathing deeply and getting some top tips for calming yourself as well before you can help other people to do the same. So if you do have concerns, it's time to be a bit of an actor. Try and portray that calm. However you feel on the inside, aim to confirm calm to the outside. And to do this, we need to think about what we say and what they overhear, our tone of voice and our body language. Okay. In most families, routines around bedtime and sleep have become a bit more relaxed over COVID, more flexible, and bedtimes have drifted until later in the evening as kids are getting up later as a result. Well, hopefully, if you're lucky. To move immediately from our more relaxed routine straight into the school morning routine is going to be a massive shock for anyone. You know yourselves, if you've been used to getting up at 8 o'clock on the morning every day for a couple of weeks and suddenly someone says, oh, you've got to get up at 5 tomorrow, it's a shock to the system, both physically and in our minds. So prepare your child for that as well if you can. A few days or a week or so before school, start making that bedtime 5 minutes earlier and then gradually build it up as you go. It's much better to do it slowly than to say to the kids, right kids, you're at school in the morning, it's bedtime now. And that bedtime might be 1 or 2 hours earlier to what they've been used to. So do it as gradually as you can before they get back to school and try not to leave it till the last minute so that the child's got more time to adjust. They won't be able to get to sleep as well if it's just a shock to the system. So moving bedtimes back gradually can be a really helpful thing to do. One of the things you don't want to have to manage with all of your child's other anxieties and stuff is exhaustion as well. We know ourselves as adults, the more tired we are, the more short-tempered we are, the more stressed we get. So we don't want to have exhaustion of a child as an extra thing to add on top of it if possible. Also think about any sorts of motivation you might need. You know, we know that children will go to school more easily if there's something exciting to look forward to when they get there. We know ourselves when we go to work or college, you know, if I stay in a hotel and I know that there's nice buffet breakfast waiting for me in the morning, I know that I'll get my butt out of bed as quickly as possible and get down there for breakfast. So think about something that will motivate your child. You know them best and you know what is going to motivate them. Is there a particular treat or privilege they're trying to earn? So one of the things that's important to remember if you are trying to motivate them to get to school on time in a calm way, that children don't do delayed gratification well. So as an adult, we're able to say to ourselves, okay, if I stick to my diet all month, I'm going to treat myself to a new dress on payday. We can wait those few days or those couple of weeks. Children very, very rarely can, particularly young children. So if there's a treat or a privilege that they're looking to earn, make sure you can break it down into really quick rewards and treats. So for example, if a child gets to the school gates on time, then you just pop it in their pocket. So an example of that would be, I was working with a parent once whose child was a school avoider, and one of the things he really wanted was a cat. Bit of a difficult one. And I said, is a cat deliverable? Is it something you're thinking of getting anyway? And she said yes. I said, okay, there's no point in saying to a 7 or 8 year old, if you go to school all month, we'll get a cat at the end of the month. So what she did was she got a picture of it, laminated it and cut it into 20 pieces. And as she arrived to the school gates, if he was on time, she'd pop like it was like a jigsaw puzzle piece of this cat in the child's pocket. So it was instant. There was a strong connection in his mind that getting to school on time, there was a pleasant consequence, and it was in his pocket, he could feel it. And if he had a decent day on the way home from school, they'd pop into Poundland and get a tin of cat food, or, you know, a cat toy, building up to this cat that he did eventually earn. It took him a whole month to get there, and then by the time that they'd got the cat, that new behaviour of getting to school on time and integrating back into school was kind of set and practised. So that's something you can try if you want to. For your child, the motivator might be sweets, a PlayStation game. Obviously, they can't have something expensive like that just at the end of the day, but you could cut up a picture of it, or little tokens that say 15 minutes extra on the trampoline today. Just cut up and laminate. Well, you don't have to laminate them, but cut up tokens, things like that on cards. For older children, teenagers, it might be pocket money broken down into smaller treats, or vouchers, a point system you could introduce as well, if that's something you think could work for your child. So for example, saying to your child, if you go into school well this morning, you can have an extra 30 minutes on the PlayStation later, will be a lot less effective than making a little coupon and saying as you arrive at the school gates, you've got to school really well today, well done. Here's a little voucher that you can keep in your pocket for that extra 30 minutes PlayStation when you get home. Okay. Make it visual, make sure they can feel it and see it, and that they know that that's something that you can deliver as well. As you go along and your child gets better and more settled into school, then you can phase them out over time or make them more difficult to earn. There are also many, if your child's worries about going to school are definitely anxiety and worry based, there are lots of stress, fidget and worry toys cheaply available online. So if you just go onto Amazon and type in stress toys, fidget toys, that kind of thing, or from shops like Poundland, they're really good as well. You need to talk to your school at the moment about what's appropriate to bring in, because I'm hearing lots of stories about they can't even bring in packed lunch boxes that aren't disposable at the moment. So see with school, what is an acceptable stress reliever for your child? Do they need a stress ball in their pocket as they work into school? One of the things that's not too intrusive is running sticky back Velcro under a desk, so either the hook side or the soft side, just a little bit under their desk that they can stroke. And that's quite a calming thing for lots of children, and a thing that can calm them down, just to rub that when they're feeling a bit anxious or worried. And it's not a particularly intrusive thing to the rest of the class as well. Obviously some things like fidget spinners and things are going to be a no-no, but sometimes a necklace, there's different types of bracelets that they can fiddle with if they're feeling anxious or stressed. Pop something in their coat pocket like a stress ball, or if their anxiety starts before or on the way to school. And smell is also a really powerful comfort to us. You know, I can smell certain things and it will take me back to pleasant times or unpleasant times. So there are lots of things, you know, if your child is the separation from yourself is what's causing the anxiety, it might be helpful to pop some of your perfume or dad's deodorant or aftershave onto a handkerchief or on part of their clothes, so they can get that familiar smell throughout the day. There's lots of other things you can try. Lavender oil is supposed to be a relaxation smell. You can try popping a few drops of those somewhere. And also, sorry, I've lost my thread there. So yeah, there's various sorts of natural calming sprays you can buy as well, that you can spray on clothes or into your mouth from places like Holland and Barrett and stuff. Physical exercise and movement before, during and after a stressful event helps reduce cortisol in the brain. So your cortisol is your stress hormone in the brain, and sometimes we feel like if somebody's stressed out, we need to sit them down and get them a nice cup of tea and make them stay still and quiet to calm down. It's actually quite often the opposite. You know, when you get a stressful piece of news on the phone yourself, what you'll often start doing is pacing around and walking around, and that's your body trying to get rid of the excess cortisol. So actually doing a little funny dance in the morning, having a bit of a run around, walking to school, that kind of thing can actually reduce stress and anxiety rather than sitting in a chair with a hot chocolate or a cup of tea, trying to calm yourself that way. Sometimes physical exercise can be a really good calmer. So everyone has been through an emotional roller coaster over the last few months. This includes you and your child. If you felt overwhelmed and worried about seeing your child back to school, that's okay. It's entirely normal, so be kind to yourself. Make sure you build in time for activities you find distressing as well, whether that's reading a book or watching a bit of TV. Even if it's just a bit of a walk, take some time alone if you need it, and all of these activities will help make you calmer and feel less stressed too. It's really, really important that you look after yourself. Like we said, put on your own mask before you try and fix other people's. It'll help you to support your child with their emotions. Okay. Lisa? Is anybody there? Lisa, Sharon?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah, sorry, Lisa, I've got,
Perfect.
this is your slide, is it mine?
Sorry, no, this is my slide.
Okay.
So, yeah, so apologies about that, everybody. I was on
Well, you got
mute
thrown
and then I
out
thought
there.
I'd unmuted myself, but
thought I'd
I hadn't.
Send everybody to sleep.
No, I'm still here. Okay, so this is really our last slide before we come on to looking at supportive resources and then questions and discussions at the end. The aim of this slide is just to think about a script for when you're talking to your children. It's always going to start with the conversation. It's going to start with, you know, some sort of behaviour and how you would tune in, or maybe a question off your child. So it's always going to start with something verbal when you're supporting your child. So the aim of this slide really is to look at providing some sort of script or stages conversation should go through. So if you research sort of how to do this, these are typically the 7 stages that you will find. So the idea of this last stage is that thinking about the emotion coaching slide that Sharon presented and the top tips as well that Lucy's just presented, the idea is that all of this can be sort of pulled together in the conversations that you have with your children. So first, we always allow children and young people to ask questions, but when they do ask questions or make a comment, what we should always do first is ask what they know already, how they feel, and we should actively listen and tune in. So what we want to do is we want to assess what they've heard and what they know already. So sometimes they might come to you with a question, but they already have an idea in their head or something that's worrying them that is encourage them to ask that question. So we want to know what that is first and foremost. So what you will often find is that worried children will ask what if questions. So what if I cannot see my friends? What if my teacher shouts at me? So what you need to do is just ask your child to tell you what they've heard and what they know already, you know, about the teacher or about the routines that are going to happen in school, for example. Actively listen so you can gauge any misunderstandings as well from your child. So you can do this by using summarizing skills. So you repeat back to your child sort of what you've heard or what you think they've said to you. So you can say something like, can I check I've heard this right? I'm going to repeat back what you've just said, and if I get anything wrong, tell me. You also can ask them how they feel, reassure and normalise their feelings as much as possible. So how does that make you feel? And don't forget to give them that really clear message that all feelings are okay. Everybody has them. They're not good or bad. We often can't help how we feel, but they pass. Feelings just are, and they pass. They move on. You don't always feel like one particular feeling all the time. Okay, so that's a really important starting point. Second, what we need to make sure we do is be clear and age appropriate in any explanations that we give. So sometimes our children, although you know, they might be 10, 11 years old, they might need an explanation that's aimed at potentially a 5-year-old, for example, because actually if they're worried and worked up, their brain won't be functioning quite as well, and therefore we need to think really carefully about how we deliver information in age appropriate terms. What you also want to do is to keep stuff as factually correct as possible. So, for example, you could say, this is what I know. You could also consider using books or stories that might help with explanations as well. So you could say something like, I know just the story that will explain this really well and help to answer your questions. Also remember, it's okay to say that you don't know. We can't know everything, can we? And it's okay to say something like, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to your question, but this is what I do know, and we can find out the rest together. Or you could say something like, I imagine lots of people are wondering the same thing. I don't know the answer, but I'll look it up and see if I can find it. There might be something that children might ask you a question about something that is happening or something that they've heard, and it might be that nobody knows the answer to it. And if that's the case, you could say something like, I don't think they know the answer to that yet, but if I hear something or if I find the answer, I'll let you know as soon as possible. Okay, so third is always about managing any anxieties. So we've spoken a little bit about sort of top tips and how we might do that. And you can help your child to manage their anxieties and label their feelings also by labeling and naming your own feelings. So you could say something like, when I think about, it makes me feel a little bit worried as well. I have a funny feeling in my tummy and questions in my head. That is how I know I am worried. Some people might also say they feel anxious or unsure. So what we want to do is we want to normalise and teach some sort of mantra or positive self-talk that includes self-care activities as well. So you could say something like, it's normal to feel worried, but we think I can do, but we can think I can do this. I know who I can speak to and who can help in school, and we can take some deep breaths and imagine we are somewhere relaxing. Keep routines and structure as well to manage any anxieties as regularly as possible, as we've already spoken about, and boost caretaking and stress reducing activities. So you could say something like, let's think about everything that's going to stay the same, as you know so you know what is happening when, and think about things that are a little bit different at this moment in time. We should also think about what makes you happy, what makes you laugh, what makes you feel calm and relaxed. Let's make a list together and plan some of these things into your day. So you want to do a whole range of normalizing feelings at this stage, keeping routines and structures the same, and encouraging your child to think about what helps them to feel calmer and more relaxed at this stage as well, and then to encourage those activities into their day. Fourth is about that control. So anxious people, as we've already mentioned, if things feel out of our control, it's more anxiety provoking, and that's perfectly normal and natural for children, for adults, for everybody. So we have to think about what can be done. That has to be the focus at this fourth stage, and if possible, something practical is often needed at this point. So you could say something like, this is what we can do, and encourage your child to be a helper as well. So if your friend had the same questions that you do from everything we've discussed and learned, what would you now say to them? Is there anything we could do for others that might help them? And we've seen that, haven't we, recently with the virus? People went into helping mode, and actually it's a really important thing to do because it gives you some of that control back, and we can encourage our children to be helpers at this stage. The fifth sort of stage of our conversation has got to be about comfort and reassurance. So letting our children know that adults are working really hard to look after them. So you could say something like, everybody's working really hard looking after each other. In school we are, in the hospitals they are, we're going to make sure we're all going to be okay. We want to be building resilience at this stage. So you can also talk to them at this stage about previous tough times, so things that they found difficult, of similar situations in the past, and how they've dealt with it. So you could say something like, have you felt this way before? Think of a time when it's been tough. What did you do? How did you get through it? And even say to them, you did get through it. You did it, didn't you, in the past? You can do it again. So it's about building that resilience for them at this stage, as well as comforting and reassuring them. What we always want to do, as well as part of our conversations that we have with our children and our work that we do with them, is to keep the door open to future questions and concerns. So we remind our children that you're always here, that we're always here, that we'll listen to them, that they can ask questions, they can tell you how they feel. And you can say something like, if you need to ask me any more questions, or just tell me what you're worried about, you can. We can find a time where we can sit and talk. So remind them that you may not always have the answer at this stage. So you could say something like, I may not have all the answers, but I will always answer as best I can. And don't forget, we can try to find out the answers together as well. Finally, and we've said this all the way through, it is really important to manage your own worries and to engage in self-care as parents. So what you might want to do with putting that oxygen mask on is finding other supportive adults you can speak to about your concerns and engage in problem-solving conversations with you. Friends are really good for that. You know, finding your own relaxation techniques. Spend time having fun as well. So that's really important. Laughter is huge and really important to help keep you calm. So, you know, finding things to laugh about is so important. Okay, so within all those 7 stages, everything we've spoken about can be fitted into them, and these stages followed in order are good stages to be thinking about when you're having a conversation. If you want to structure a little bit, if you want to know that you've covered everything, these stages are really useful for that. Okay, Sharon?
Okay, thank you. So here we've got some websites that contain resources for you to access and use to support your children. So I mean, there's a lot more, but what we've got here is the Parent Carer Forum. It contains a number of resources that parents have asked for from educational psychology. It includes information on emotion coaching, teaching mindfulness, sensory and self-regulation activities that help to calm and soothe, for example. You've got Young Minds. They offer advice, resources, and a parent helpline if you feel like you may need to ring them. There's NHS England, which provides some useful signs to look out for if your children are struggling, and some helpful tips. They also promote the 24/7 NHS helpline that people can access for help and support. If you're feeling brave, parents and carers can access the PSHE topics and lessons that can be looked at together at home. For example, they've got topics on sleep, secondary transition, and what to do about worry. Minded have some great resources on parenting, building confidence, and mental health to help you to support yourselves and your children. And UNICEF have frequently asked questions that they try to answer to help parents help their children to navigate their feelings about returning to school. Okay, so I'm going to pass back to Lisa.
Okay, so there's now some time for some questions, comments, or discussions. If you would like to speak, then you can raise your hand using the hand function. So if you just float your mouse over the screen, you should see a little hand, and you just click on that. And then that means that each person can be asked in turn if you want to ask a question, or even just comment, or even start up a little bit of a discussion. This is something I always do, is forget to lower my hand. So when you've sort of spoken, if you click back on it again, then the hand will disappear. Otherwise, people keep coming back to you. Okay, so is there anybody here who would like to ask any question or provide any comments?
We're all ready and waiting. Oh, I think we have one.
So we'll be able to download this PowerPoint at all.
Yeah.
Yes, you will. It's got to go back through our comms in Dudley. So what happens is, because I've pressed record on it, what will happen is it goes to some sort of Microsoft streaming system. So then if I forward it on to Dudley Comms, it should then be accessible then for people to download. I'm going to speak to Dudley Comms because they have a list of attendees as well and participants from the meeting. So they should be able to email them all over as well to people. But otherwise, yes, it will be available for people to listen to and to have at the end. That's part of the reason for recording it and asking if it was okay to record it at the beginning. Okay.
There's another question. How do you reassure your child about the safety of their sibling who was shielding during lockdown?
Yeah, okay. So just going to Claire, do you want to just sort of unmute and just have a quick chat about this? Are you there? If I stop presenting and just put my face back up, would that be easier, and turn my camera on to have a conversation?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
is that Claire?
It
Yeah.
is. Hello.
Okay, give me a bit of background about this. So there's a sibling who was shielding. Is that sibling going to then return to school?
Yeah. So
And your other child is worried about
Yeah.
that sibling. Okay, so focus on the can-do bit. Focus on, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do to keep everybody safe. This is, you know, that little bit where you need to put it back in control if they're having a little worry about it. So listen, reassure, comfort, understand, and focus on the can-do bit. These are our plans. This is what we're going to do. Can you think of anything else that we can do? But this is how we're going to keep everybody safe. So have a real focus upon that point.
Yeah.
That would be how I would manage that. Yeah.
It doesn't help that they both go to separate schools. So one
Okay.
goes to special needs school and the other one goes to mainstream. And
Right.
the child in mainstream worries about the special needs child, and
Yeah.
he feels he has to protect her. And he's only 8.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's quite normal. And that shows a lovely relationship between them as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. And you might want to, I mean, maybe part of the reassurance and the can do is about going on to the website as well, like the website, to show sort of what they are doing as well. So they're working hard to keep everybody safe. This is how you know, they're going to be looked after. This is what we can do as well. So I would have a real focus on that can do bit with him. Just make him feel as though we can put some things back into control, back in within his control. All right, Claire.
Lovely. Thank you.
That's okay. No worries. So I can see a hand up here. So Natasha.
It says, my child suffers with saying he can't breathe and hurts somewhere. Do you think this is anxiety?
Yeah. It's often panic. Yeah, it's often panic, isn't it, Natasha? So I don't know if you want to unmute and have a little little chat about that. But yeah, that's really difficult, isn't it? So teaching some breathing techniques. My youngest daughter does the same. She often panics. So my husband hosted a bit of a socially isolated barbecue for work colleagues. They were all spread out around the garden at a 2-metre distance. But when everybody arrived, and because she didn't know them, exactly the same thing happened to her. Like, she really struggled to get a breath. And I will teach her that. I will say, these are your thoughts. This is what's happened to your body. Just take some deep breaths. You'll be okay. And now what we need to do is we need to plan on, you know, what made you feel quite breathless, and let's work on what we can do about that and what we can do. You know, so for her, it was about having time in her room, not being forced out of it by her dad, who didn't really understand, because she didn't want him to know, and you know, just having just having some time really to get used to some strange people, and also waiting for somebody she knew to arrive. So we talked through all of that as a little plan for come out when you're ready. So it is really difficult, but yeah, that panic is often anxiety then that sets that off. And children will say, because my daughter says, she says, I don't know why this happened. I'm a bit worried, and I can't breathe, and I want to be able to breathe, and I don't want to feel like this. The children often don't want to feel how they're feeling as well. So that's really difficult too. That reassurance is huge.
There's a few good breathing techniques for children and adults you can try, Natasha, just Googling them. I don't know if you've come across the Take 5. So you'll teach a child to breathe in and out, in and out, in and out, really slowly, just to try and control the breathlessness and the feelings of anxiety. And there's several different ones you could try, finding them offline and seeing which one suits your child the best.
Yeah, it's just finding out what works for your children sometimes, isn't it? So yeah, so I mean, my daughter, for years I've been trying to teach some of these techniques, and she just yells at me, it doesn't work, stop telling me to do that. So you get a little bit of that, but they do get to a certain age, whereas if you keep going and you just say to them, well, let's find something that does work. And now she Googles her own techniques. I mean, she's coming up to 11, she's 10, almost 11, so she Googles her own techniques now. Googled this, Mum, I'm going to try this, I'm going to do this. So we're at that stage now, which is really lovely. But that's through me being over the years saying, let's try this, and her shouting at me and saying, no, it doesn't work. But because I've kept going and kept saying to her, it's important you find something that works for you, she started to do that now for herself. So you do get to that point if you keep going at it, keep giving them the same messages. Yeah, but it is tough, and it's frightening for them. They get very frightened as well when they can't breathe. Is that okay, Natasha?
Yeah, I was going to say, he's been suffering since January off and on, and we didn't know if it was asthma, you see, because his dad's got asthma, so it's something that we're looking at. But it's all like, he'll mention it for the day, and he'll also mention it on a night quite a lot, and it takes him ages to switch off on a night. Yeah, it sounds a little bit like worry, but it might be. I mean, if there is something medical underlying it, it's amazing how it just ends up in that little loop of I can't breathe, and therefore it makes me panic, and therefore I'm worried about it. And whereas actually, potentially, if it is asthma and has an inhaler and that gets sorted, you might find everything else vanishes as well. So in terms of the worry, so it's really difficult to know sometimes if there isn't something else underlying it that might be more medical in nature. But yeah, just you have to work on them building up their own techniques. It's so important for that, and they typically start to pick up and think about stuff around the age of 10. They just become more emotionally mature around the age of 10. But I've worked on that from a really young age, with my youngest daughter, and I think something that's really important to say as well is that anxiety can be really positive as well, in that it can get our adrenaline running, and it can I was quite anxious about delivering this webinar today, but actually it made me a little bit more focused. So it can be really positive as well. And what we find with our anxious children, if we really work on them in techniques, their toolbox for managing their emotions as they become older, and their resilience as adults, it could be phenomenal. So I mean, I have 2 children. My youngest one is very anxious. My oldest one is so laid back, it's beyond belief. So they're two completely same. My one's 13, doesn't care, and then the other really too much on the ball.
Absolutely, and lots of parents will find that with their children. And but my older one, when she does come across a difficult situation that worries her, she has a real meltdown, whereas my younger one would know what strategies to use now. We've almost got to that point over working on it for a number of years. She has a toolbox, whereas my older one doesn't, because she's never needed it. So although it is really difficult to manage, and we do worry about our children that worry and that are anxious, actually in the long run it could be a really lovely sort of positive thing as well, because they could really pick stuff up and know how to help themselves around it all.
I guess Natasha, like Lisa was saying, it's important to find out whether it is a physical thing or whether it's a psychological thing for him, because children are catching ends of conversations, no matter how hard we try to protect them. They're listening to bits of the news about how people can become breathless with COVID. And so is it actually a physical thing like asthma, or is he just getting these ideas in his head and then magnifying and feeling very real for him? So I guess it's important to find out, once you know what you're dealing with, whether it's a physical thing or a psychological thing, you'll know best how to approach it then, won't you?
It's very worrying a lot of the time.
Yeah,
it is. It's really worrying for us as parents, isn't it? That's why that self-care as parents is so important.
All I keep saying is when he says he can't breathe and he hurts somewhere, he's, oh, you'll be okay in a minute, you'll be right in 5 minutes, just try and say like it's not obviously an ongoing thing and he'll feel better. And then I normally say, do you feel better now? And he'll be like, oh yeah, it's okay now.
Yeah. So he's learning that he can cope with it and it will go away. Perhaps it would just be giving him some breathing techniques or something to try and make it go a bit faster or calm down a bit quicker, whatever. Have a little Google, see what he likes, what he might use as a strategy.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Right. That's okay. Right, I think quite a few people have sort of left our conversation, but we are here if anybody else wants to sort of ask anything.
We've got some troopers still in here.
We have. We can stay a little bit longer, and a few thank yous off people in the chat, and we do really appreciate, all of your support and joining our webinar today. It's the first time we've run one, so it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I think we got through it, and thank you all for supporting us with doing this. Okay.